You don't get to fear me and investigate me behind my back. Pick one.
I was protecting my father. That's all this was ever supposed to be.
12 years ago, I signed a report I never should have trusted blindly. Then tell me whose hand really wrote it before it costs us everything.
This signature isn't my father's, and it was never truly yours either, Jaewon.
Then whose is it?
Someone you have called family for 31 years.
Empire City, 7:52 in the morning. Federal agents are walking into Han Meridian Tower, and the last name Calloway is about the most dangerous word in Jaewon Han's world again. Cameras flashed before the elevator doors even opened. Jaewon pushed through his own lobby like a stranger in it, watching federal agents walk his father toward the doors in handcuffs. Chairman Suho Han did not resist. He did not speak. He only looked for his son's face in the crowd and found it. Then Jaewon saw her. A woman in a charcoal blazer stood near the security desk, unmoving, a slim folder in her hand and a silver watch on her wrist. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't taking photos. She was simply watching the way someone watches a debt finally come due. Forensic examiner, she said, when a guard asked for her credentials. Amina Calloway. Jaewon felt the floor tilt. He had heard that name exactly once before, when he was 9 years old, standing outside his father's study, in a voice he had never heard his father use. If Calloway ever comes back into our lives, Jaewon, we run. He never explained why. Jaewon had spent 22 years telling himself it didn't matter. 12 years later, a Calloway had walked straight through the front door, past the cameras, past the shouting, past his father in handcuffs, and she hadn't so much as blinked. She wasn't running from anyone. She looked, if anything, like a woman who had been waiting a very long time for this exact morning. By noon, the story was everywhere. Former rival's daughter leads fraud probe into Han family. One headline read. Reporters didn't call it justice. They called it revenge, dressed up in a blazer. Jaewon found her outside the DA's office that evening, calm as a locked door. Walk away from this case, he said. Everyone will understand why. Would they, Amina asked. Or would they just be relieved they don't have to look at what's in these files? My father is not the man 12 years of rumors made him. I didn't build a rumor, Mr. Han. I build cases out of numbers. If your father is innocent, my numbers will say so. If he isn't, they will say that too. I don't have a side. I have evidence. She checked her watch, an old scratch thing that looked strange on a woman who dressed so precisely. You should go home. You look like a man who hasn't slept since your father's name became Calloway's problem. She walked away before he could answer, and Jaewon stood there, furious that the sharpest thing she had said all night was the one that was true. If you were in Jaewon's shoes tonight, would you trust the woman holding your family's fate? Or fight her every step of the way? Tell me where you're watching from tonight and hit subscribe, because Empire City Romance Stories is just getting started. And the next few minutes are going to change everything you think you know about who the real villain is. Back in her apartment, Amina set the case file on her kitchen table and did what she always did before opening a new file. She touched her father's watch. It had stopped at 2:14 the night he died, still at his desk, still fighting an appeal no one believed he deserved. She had never had it repaired. Some part of her wasn't ready for time to move again. She opened the file. Han Meridian's newest shipping insurance filing, flagged for irregular safety data. She almost laughed. The formatting, the exact structure of the numbers was identical to a report she had memorized as a teenager, word for word, number for number. The report that destroyed her father. Someone had reused it. 12 years later, and someone inside the Han Empire had reused the very template that ended James Calloway's life's work. The question wasn't whether there was fraud. The question was who else already knew that. The pressure came fast, and it came from every direction. A Han Meridian lawyer offered her a consulting contract worth more than her yearly salary, if her final report could be filed efficiently and quietly, before the press cycle turned. She said no before he finished the sentence. A second call came an hour later, less polite, reminding her that careers depended on staying on the right side of powerful clients. She wrote both calls down, time-stamped, and kept working. Her mother, Grace, called that night, her voice tight with old fear. Baby, please. I watched what this family did to your father, $1 and one lawyer at a time. I can't watch it happen to you too. I'm not looking for revenge, Mama. I know you believe that. Grace's voice cracked. I just need you to still believe it in 3 weeks when it gets harder. Meanwhile, at Han Meridian, Vice Chairman Dang Yoon, the man Jaewon had called uncle since he was 7 years old, sat across from him with folded hands and a voice like warm tea. Let the girl do her job, Jaewon, he said. The truth will protect your father. It always has. He refilled Jaewon's cup himself, the way he had done since Jaewon was a boy too small to reach the pot. Jaewon didn't notice, not yet, how easily Yoon said always. He didn't notice that Yoon remembered the exact wording of a 12-year-old report he claimed he barely recalled. 3 days later, Amina found out that someone from Han Meridian's legal team had quietly pulled her personnel file, her old graduate school disciplinary records, even a decade-old parking ticket, looking for anything to make her look unstable on a witness stand. She found out Jaewon had personally approved it. She showed up at his office at 9 that night, and for the first time she raised her voice. You don't get to be afraid of me and investigate me at the same time, she said. Pick one. I was protecting my father. I know exactly what that feels like. Her voice shook now, all that control finally cracking. I was 19 when my father died, still trying to clear his name. 19. I watched him lose his company, his reputation, his health, and I watched your family keep every penny of it. And you have the nerve to dig through my parking tickets? Jaewon opened his mouth to defend himself and stopped. For the first time, he actually looked at her instead of the danger she represented. I grew up hearing my father whisper your last name like it was a curse, he said quietly. I never once asked him why. I was too scared of the answer. Silence sat between them, heavier than either accusation had been. Here's a question worth sitting with. If discovering the whole truth meant you finally understood the man who broke your family, would you still want to look away? Or would you need to see it no matter what it cost you? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story already has you invested, go ahead and like this video, because what Amina finds next changes absolutely everything. Amina worked through the night, running the old Calloway audit numbers against the newly filed report, line by line, and then she found it. Her father's original calculations were correct. Every one. The fraud hadn't happened in his office. It happened after his report left his hands, before it ever reached the board, when someone quietly replaced 4 key pages. James Calloway had not lied. He had been erased. She sat back in her chair at 3 in the morning and cried for the first time in years, not from grief this time, but from 12 years of being right and having no one believe her. When she told Jaewon the next morning, his face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with fear for himself. If my father's report was switched, he said slowly, someone inside our own company did it. Someone my father trusted enough to hand him a stack of papers without checking every page. Someone your father still trusts, Amina said. That's what worries me. The board split within a day. Half wanted Amina's findings buried until after the trial. Half wanted answers immediately. Into that gap stepped Vice Chairman Yoon, calling an emergency vote to name himself interim chairman for stability, while Suho sat in a federal holding cell and Jaewon sat frozen between grief and duty. Jaewon watched Yoon work the room, the same warm voice, the same folded hands, collecting votes like a man who had done this before. For the first time in his life, Jaewon wondered how a man could sound so calm while quietly taking control of everything his best friend had spent a lifetime building. He had no proof of anything, just a feeling small and cold, that he had never once asked Uncle Yoon a hard question in 31 years. Suho requested one supervised visit before the emergency hearing, and he asked for both his son and Amina Calloway to be there. He looked smaller in the visitation room than Jaewon had ever seen him, an old man in a gray jumpsuit where a chairman used to stand. 12 years ago, Suho said, his hands trembling on the table, Yoon handed me a final safety report the night before a board vote. I was exhausted. I trusted him completely. I signed it without reading every page myself. He looked at Amina now, ashamed in a way that made him look, for a moment, almost like a stranger to his own son. Your father called our office 4 times that month, asking for one chance to explain his numbers before the board voted. I never called him back. Some part of me wondered even then if the story was too convenient. I told myself it wasn't my job to wonder. That was a coward's silence, and I have carried it for 12 years, in a house I never let myself feel at peace in. Amina didn't forgive him. Not yet. Forgiveness wasn't something she owed anyone on a schedule. But something in her chest loosened for the first time since she was 19. Hearing the truth spoken out loud, by the man who had let it stay buried, instead of finding it herself in a file somewhere. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" Jaewon asked quietly. "Because I didn't want my son to know his father was capable of being that weak." Suho's confession helped clear the old Calloway case, but it made his current legal situation worse. Prosecutors now argued he had shown a clear pattern of signing critical documents without verifying them, reckless enough to support the new fraud charge on its own. And Yoon, now interim chairman, moved fast. He restricted Amina's access to the company archive, citing conflict of interest, 2 full days before the emergency hearing that would decide whether Suho faced formal federal charges. He did it warmly, almost gently, with a statement about protecting the integrity of the investigation. Nobody on the board thought to question him. Nobody ever had. "Without the archive, I can't finish tracing the signature on the original report," Amina told Jaewon, standing in his office at midnight with 2 days left on the clock. "Someone is trying to make sure I run out of time before I can prove anything." "Then we don't use the archive," Jaewon said. "We find another way." "My father kept private files at home for 30 years. He never trusted the company servers completely, not even with his own signature. If anyone still has an untouched copy of anything from that period, it's my father or it's you. We are one twist away from finding out who has been controlling this entire story from the very beginning, and I promise you it is not who you think. Before I show you, tell me in the comments who you believe is really behind all of this, and if you haven't already, subscribe now because you do not want to miss the next few minutes." That night, Amina finally did what she had avoided for over a decade. She opened the back case of her father's silver watch, the one detail she had never let herself examine too closely. Engraved inside SB 2214. Not a serial number. A safety deposit box. Inside that box the next morning sat her father's original carbon copy ledger, untouched, alongside a note in his own handwriting, dated the week before he died. "I believe D. Yoon altered the final report. I have no proof yet. Keep looking." Amina finally had her proof. A forensic handwriting analysis of the clerical countess signature that had quietly appeared on the substituted report 12 years ago matched, stroke for stroke, pressure for pressure, Daeung Yoon's own hand. The same man who forged a report to destroy James Calloway 12 years ago had grown careless enough, after 12 years of never once being questioned, to reuse that very same falsified template in this year's filing, the filing that put Suho Han in a federal holding cell. One man, 2 families, 12 years apart. Jaewon stared at the evidence spread across the table and felt something in his chest break cleanly in half. The uncle who taught him to sail. The uncle who cried at his mother's funeral. The uncle who had spent 12 years calling himself family, while the truth stayed locked inside a widow's watch. The emergency hearing became something no one expected. Amina presented her evidence to the full board, federal prosecutors, and a room full of reporters who had spent a week calling her dangerous. Daeung Yoon denied everything, smiling that same warm smile, calling it a tragic coincidence, calling Amina a grieving daughter chasing ghosts. He was still smiling when the handwriting analysis appeared on the screen behind her, his own signature glowing beside the 12-year-old forgery, stroke matched to stroke, an exact result the forensic examiner explained left no statistical room for coincidence. He stopped smiling. In the front row, Jaewon watched the last piece of his childhood quietly fold in on itself, and did not look away. Within the hour, Yoon was removed from the board and taken into federal custody on new charges. The fraud allegations against Suho Han, tied directly to the falsified data, were formally dropped. He would still answer, separately and publicly, for signing documents he never verified, stepping down as chairman and funding an independent audit of every filing from his final decade in charge. Justice, not a parade. Suho walked out of the federal detention center 2 days later into daylight, older, quieter, and finally truly free. Amina was there, not because she had to be, but because some part of her needed to see it. Suho stopped in front of her, and said only, "Thank you for finishing what your father started. I know it wasn't for me. It was for him. And it should have been." Amina nodded once. She still wasn't ready to call it forgiveness, but she let herself accept the thank you, and that for now was enough. Jaewon found Amina on the courthouse steps that same afternoon. "I owe you an apology that doesn't have an excuse attached to it," he said. "I let my legal team dig through your personal life because I was afraid of you. I should have been afraid for you instead. I'm sorry for what that cost you, and I know an apology doesn't undo it." He handed her a folder. Inside was a formal public correction of her father's professional record, already filed with Han Meridian's legal department under her name, and the first documents for a new endowed fellowship in forensic ethics at her father's old university, named for James Calloway. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today," Jaewon said. "I just needed you to know I finally understand what silence costs. My father taught me that a Han never runs. I spent my whole life thinking that meant never backing down." He looked at her fully now, without any armor left. "I think it actually means never running from the truth. Even when the truth is us." Amina looked down at her watch, quiet in her palm. That evening, for the first time in 10 years, she had it repaired. It started ticking again at 6:47 on a Tuesday, on the same steps where her father's name had finally come clean. She didn't say yes to anything that day. She simply let herself, for the first time in a very long while, stop bracing for the worst. Grace Calloway framed the university's official letter beside her husband's photograph, and she cried the good kind of tears, the kind that come after 12 long years of holding your breath. Some truths arrive too late to undo all the damage, but they still arrive. And sometimes, the person with every right to burn a family to the ground chooses instead to hand them the truth, and lets them decide what to build from the ashes. That's the whole heart of Empire City romance stories. Every sacrifice has a witness, and every witness eventually tells the truth. If this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe and like before you go, and tell me honestly in the comments. If you were Amina standing on those courthouse steps with your father's watch finally ticking again, could you have chosen truth over revenge? I read every single comment, so don't be shy. Turn on notifications because our next story drops soon. And I promise you it's going to break your heart in the best way. Thank you for watching Empire City Romance Stories. I will see you in the next one.